1, is there any items on today's agenda that give rise to conflict of interest, pecuniary interest? Councillor Simpson indicates same.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll recuse myself for 12.1.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed. And we are at item number 2, adoption of the agenda. Councillor Simpson.
Your Worship, I would like to add onto the agenda about garbage pickup.
Okay, we'll add that to 7.4 if that's. Any other additions, or if not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Councillor Simpson moves that we approve the amended agenda. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Then we have 3.1, regular council meeting minutes of May 25, 2020. Any errors or omissions? Councillor Holm? Okay, Councillor Holm moves the minutes as presented. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, and then we have item 4.1, pool opening decision. We have Cam Mills and Justin McPherson. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Thank you. So at the previous meeting on May 25th, we provided a report to council discussing some options associated with opening the pool for the summer 2020 season. At that time, council tabled the report to continue the discussion here today. This report that has been provided provides additional information regarding what may be required in order to both open and operate the pool this summer, should that be determined to be the desire of council. So at the May 25th, 2020 meeting, administration identified some of the challenges associated with the potential opening of the pool during the 2020 swimming season in light of the provincial public health measures precipitated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We outlined these challenges primarily as being either of an operational or financial nature, so operational issues including physical distancing, occupancy, and other safety measures. And these are exacerbated by the lack of information that is available or will be needed to meet the provincial guidelines associated with public swimming pools. Based on past trends, we've noticed that the province has not been providing much notice for facility reopenings. And while a lack of advance notice is easier to navigate for non-staffed amenities such as playgrounds, it is difficult to respond to for facilities like swimming pools and ice arenas that are far more complicated to operate. We are asking council to consider the extent that special occupancy limits will have on pools and to consider issues, for example, will change rooms be open and so on and so forth. The key governance considerations for council at this time are the extent that we should expend funds to allow administration to take proactive steps that will allow for the facility to open, given that no date or operating guidelines have been determined for such facilities. We do know that the pool's rebuilt mechanical system will allow for pool opening within the projected earliest case timelines, and in fact that the pool began filling on June 5th. Second, the extent to which council is comfortable opening a facility in light of any potential public health risks. As noted, the delay in opening at this time is because the province has not provided a green light to operate such a facility, nor have we been provided with a date as to when this may occur. Should such information become available, it will be up to the local authority, in this case the town, to determine whether they wish to open the facility and under the parameters provided by the health authority. So these issues, as described, are further compounded by the reality that as an outdoor pool, largely staffed with students in a lifeguarding capacity and furthermore at the mercy of summer weather, that pool operations cannot simply be extended to a later date, typically closing on August 31st. There's a limited operating window for the facility that is tightened by these restrictions. So again, the question comes, to what extent is it worth opening a facility that already has a short season? So with these issues in mind and considering administration's recommendation at the previous meeting, administration does acknowledge the important role the facility plays in the lives of Coaldale residents. And we note and support council's determined to open the facility if at all feasible. That feasibility is ultimately what needs to be determined. The information contained in the report provided is intended to provide council with some perspective on what will be required to open a facility of this type, with the caveat that administration cannot provide clarity in terms of when the pool will be able to open, when the provincial minimum requirements will be, or how much notice will be provided prior to the facility being eligible for public use. To provide council with additional information, I've provided two sort of, call them mini reports within the report. Caitlin Davis, who's joined us here today, is in charge of overseeing the day-to-day operations of the pool from a staffing perspective. And we've received a report from her as well as from Russ Tanner, who is the Director of Recreation Facility Services for the City of Brooks, who operates a pool facility as well as a number of other facilities. So to hear from Caitlin, with respect to hiring, 10 lifeguards have expressed a desire to return to work in Coaldale from the 12 that were hired previously, with the caveat that 7 of those 10 would require like a full-time placement to begin immediately in order to be willing to come on board. We would be able to fit them into the town parks operations department potentially until such a time that they can be called on for lifeguarding duty. A minimum of 2 additional lifeguards, and likely more, will need to be hired and trained prior to opening, which will take a minimum of 2 weeks. As noted, Director of Operations Justin McPherson has indicated that the lifeguards could be folded into parks operations on an as-needed basis. This would functionally adjust the service level offering of the Parks Department during such a time as they were providing that function. With respect to the training that is required, both for the returning lifeguards as well as new lifeguards, there would be training and orientation and pool preparation that would need to occur over an additional 2-week period. Would be a thorough cleaning of the entire inside of the building, pool deck and outside area, a town and safety orientation, a regular lifeguard in-service, training of COVID-19 specific first aid and lifeguarding procedures and protocols, training of overall COVID-19 facility operating procedures and guidelines, as well as training on the new software that manages the pool, which is RecDesk. In addition to that, tasks which would need to be completed by the new pool manager as well as the community services department would include determining the pool schedule, determining theoretical limited capacity numbers, and how we will control patron numbers in a facility while trying to get as many people through the doors to swim as possible. In line with whatever physical distancing requirements may be in place. This may include changes to change room procedures, washroom access, entry requirements, that sort of thing. There would require substantial advertising to the community with respect to both the pool schedule as well as new protocols and rules that would be put in place. We would determine new financial reporting as well as an overall understanding and implementation of procedures and protocols for COVID-19. So based on that, provided the town can accommodate alternative work arrangements for lifeguards, it's feasible to open the pool in a period of approximately 4 weeks. So in addition to the above, as mentioned, we did speak with Russ Tanner as well. So again, Russ is the manager of recreation services for the City of Brooks, very experienced professional in these matters, past president of the Alberta Association of Recreation Facility Personnel, and he's been involved in high-level discussions with provincial officials in regards to Alberta's path to opening. His notes were as follows. First of all, during a meeting of the AARFP with Alberta Health Services, a representative from Alberta Health Services indicated that there would likely be some restrictions that were loosened. The example provided would be for more freedom of numbers. However, currently, stage 3 of the reopening plan continues to include a minimal social or physical distancing requirement of 2 meters, which is an issue associated with these types of openings, and at this time there hasn't been any indication that will be loosened. So he noted that based on these measures, there are fundamentally 2 types of facilities that he's seeing opening. One, those planning for a gradual or soft opening, so facilities planning to open with restricted numbers, fundamentally opening for things like swimming lessons, though again, swimming lessons would require likely a parent in the pool, particularly with younger children, because there would not be an ability to be physical contact between the lifeguard and the person taking the lesson, which is obviously a problem for the less experienced swimmers. allowing for lane swims and sign-up times to control the number of people in the pool, water fitness classes, swim clubs, and family-specific bookings. Basically, that comes down to the concept of taking reservations and taking bookings to access the pool, but not necessarily opening the pool for a free swim type of environment, which is what tends to fill a pool like ours on a hot day, particularly a hot weekend. Other types of facilities are not planning to open under current restrictions unless restrictions improve to allowing for 50 or more people to have entry, as well as having social distancing requirements lifted or substantially reduced. What Russ is seeing is that those undertaking option 1 is largely year-round swimming pools that are preparing to take that step, and option 2 being the common choice of smaller, typically outdoor seasonal facilities. He noted in his response that the pools which are planning to stay closed in southern Alberta include Vulcan, McGrath, Bassano, Medicine Hat, outdoor pools in Medicine Hat, I should say Redcliffe and Cardston, and Raymond, Crow's Nest, Pass, and Picture Butte being as yet undecided within his network. This information, again, is based on the most recent information that he had heard from Alberta Health Services, as well as Alberta's Association of Recreation Facility Personnel, noting that that information is changing fairly rapidly. And Mr. Tanner further notes that the decision to close in other municipalities is largely one which comes down to the issue of cost and the increased inefficiency associated with opening for a shorter season, noting that revenues would reasonably lower, costs would be higher, and a shorter season provides for less opportunity to recover startup and shutdown costs associated with the operation. The original recommendation of administration to close the pool for the season was based on this desire for cost efficiency. However, again, it is noted that the pool is a community service, so a balance between efficiency and the desire to provide this service must certainly be considered. At this time, administration is recommending fundamentally one of two paths. First, if council does want to direct administration to attempt to open the pool, we're asking that council consider directing administration to take all measures outlined in this report to begin preparations for opening the pool, acknowledging the possibility that opening could be delayed indefinitely, and furthermore, that council direct administration to open the pool when authorized by Alberta's chief medical officer or their designate, provided that restrictions on the number of people eligible to be within the facility is lifted to 50 or more, and provided that physical distancing requirements have been lifted or significantly relaxed, and provided that this has occurred no later than July 20th, 2020, or some other date that is appropriate for council. The date, July 20th, just to provide council with a frame of reference, July 20th is a Monday. That would potentially allow the pool to be open by approximately July 25th, which is a Saturday, which would give us a 5-week pool season. Alternatively, if council wishes to direct administration to keep the pool closed, recommendation number 3 provides council with that path. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We also have, as I mentioned, Justin McPherson and Caitlin Davis here with us today, so they can provide some additional information should council desire it.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. I'll throw the floor open to questions by council. Councilor Lloyd?
Your worship, you didn't mention if any pools have already said that they're going to be open. What are they doing in Brooks?
So Brooks has one of those indoor facilities, so they're within that option 1 group that he had described.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Chapman?
Thank your worship, and through to Cam, if I may, thank you so much for your report. And I guess I do have some questions, but also a strong hesitation with this year's planning for opening the pool. So I'll be speaking to recommendation number 3. Part of the point being is that for the size of population that we have, that our pool is primarily a small pool in comparison to some other pools, maybe Raymond or some of the other ones that have a smaller population and a larger footprint for a pool size. And so I don't know the exact numbers on a daily basis, say in the summertime, whether you have 30 or 40 or 50 people in the pool. And the physical distancing part for this size of a pool would be largely impossible to monitor and patrol. So that would form a difficult situation. The other thing too is I'm not too sure if the other pools are kind of breaking down age groups or what have you for attending the pool, whether, you know, Alberta Health Services is saying, you know, anybody under 16 or under 18 would be prohibited or anything to that matter. So it would kind of disenfranchise, if that were the case, disenfranchise some people who would ultimately be using the pool, especially of a younger age. The final thing that comes to mind, just in discussion from various community people here in Coaldale, asking them the question of what their thoughts are on the pool, and they do not have a preference whether to be open or not, and are okay with a closed season.
Chapman, anybody else? Councillor Holm?
I'm going to be just the opposite. I'm going to speak in favor of option 1 to open as soon as we can, as soon as it's health officials tell us it's open. First off, when we talk about the startup and shutdown costs, I'm assuming we're going to have to eat an awful lot of those costs anyways, because we are going to be testing our pool to make sure the repairs worked. So we're going to have to charge the pool, run it for a while, and decommission it anyway. So I don't think those should really come into the equation. Second thing that I really have on my mind is the idea of hiring these staff members right now that we can, the lifeguards now, and putting them in part of parks, to me is a huge plus to this town. Looking around our green spaces right now in town, it's almost embarrassing, because we do have some awfully tall grass in every one of our parks that a lawnmower should have been on a long time ago, and now when we do cut it, it's going to look like crap for a while anyways. I think we can certainly make use of these people right now, and if we never get a chance to open, we still have them to provide that service to the parks, because we're already starting. Some of the ball diamonds are opening up with some of it. Heard rumors that soccer may actually exist again this year. Right now there isn't a chance in our soccer fields beside the quads that you could actually have little kids play soccer, because they wouldn't have enough strength to kick the ball 10 feet, let alone from one end to the other because of the tall grass. So I'm very much in favor of hiring these people as soon as we can and try and clean up and re-beautify the town a little bit. Another question I have is what's happening in Lethbridge? It's kind of interesting that isn't part of the report, yet it's our nearest neighbor, our nearest person or community that we would impact us. So I'm just wondering what's happening there. So I'm very much in favor, if at all possible, to get the 7 lifeguards or the 10 lifeguards hired, put them into parks. We can certainly make use of them. I'm thinking to do the cleanup around the pool, do some of the training prior to having the okay from Alberta Health to open. And if we don't, okay, so it's some training hours that we spent. But when we look back at our 2020 budget that we passed in December, at that time, all these costs were included in that budget that we passed and okayed. So it's not like it's new money. So I'm certainly in favor of option 1.
My question, if we went with the option number 1, what is our overall cost difference if we did not open the pool? Like, how much are we probably looking at as an expense compared to if we didn't open the pool but we still had to fill it up, run it, and decommission it?
So in our previous report, we'd identified approximately $50,000 in savings associated with not opening the pool. That is relative to the projected budget for the pool. The difficult thing here is that it's very difficult for us to say what the cost of opening the pool will be until we know what the guidelines are. If we need the normal complement of staff, plus additional staff to monitor physical distancing, plus additional staff to monitor change rooms, plus additional staff to mind a lineup, for example, outside and make sure people stay cool if they're lined up for an hour in the hot sun or things like that. Until we know the guidelines, it's really hard for us to say what the sort of staffing cost will be associated with opening the pool. So the $50,000 of savings was relative to previous years. If we open the pool right away, to address Roger's point about startup and shutdown, there is a certain amount of money that's being spent as part of the pool repair associated with getting things started up. There is a startup and shutdown cost associated with things like training and some of the cleaning and maintenance that is going to be built in associated with whether or not we decide to make this decision. So it's very difficult for us to project some of these financials, unfortunately, with any sort of certainty until we have a sense of what the requirements are going to be. But unfortunately, we're in a position where we feel that in order to effectively move forward with a pool opening, given how much the steps we know need to happen, we need to make that decision now so that we can get moving and just sort of do the best projection we can with respect to those costs.
Ability of lifeguards, did you also suggest that maybe they would be doing other duties other than lifeguarding, and would they be amenable to being retasked for Parks and Recreation?
I did not, just because at that time I didn't know that was an option when I reached out to them right after the last council meeting. Out of the 10 that have expressed a desire to come back, 3 of them do have other part-time jobs that they would also be dedicating their time to. But the 7 of them, I believe, do not have any work right now, and a few of them I did talk more with, and they'd be interested in doing anything they could to get hours in a job for the summer.
So like I kind of buy into a little bit of what Councillor Holm was saying about, you know, maybe retasking the lifeguards for other duties around the town, and that to, number one, give young people a bit of a job opportunity, and number 2, to help with the, you know, overall appearance of the town, etc. But so I'm kind of that, I'm in favor of that aspect, but I just don't see opening the pool without a definitive thing, you know, because it's just like, when you were talking last council meeting, I kind of, well, after that meeting, it kind of resonated that maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to be able to have that amenity to bring a lot of, you know, pleasure to the residents of Coaldale. But, you know, when you really look at how the operation of the pool would be, it's a very small number of people, in my mind, that could really benefit from it. You know, a few people that would want to take swim lessons, or, you know, just public, you know, limited number of people that could reserve it, kind of thing. You know, I think the greater benefit of a pool like Coaldale's is the summers when, you know, the kids and the family can all en masse come and splash around and get cool and, you know, have unstructured play at the pool. But I think everything you do at the pool this year would have to be structured beyond belief in that. So, you know, I can't see us being able to really operate the pool, but I wouldn't mind entertaining an idea of bringing people on board if they can be usefully employed in the Parks and Recreation part of it. Councillor Simpson?
Council, I did reach out to a few people, especially families, and a lot of their suggestion was it's more for mental health than it is for anything with keeping the pool open. So I have a hard time because I actually don't think we're going to be able to open the pool per standards. I think it's going to be really, really hard, and I think, you know, the only option, like, I hate to choose one of these options. I really hate to do it because I see, I think 3 is going to happen, but number 1, if we went with that, we could always still not open the pool. We could just still use that staff and then say, hey, those regulations are too strict. So, you know, but I'm wondering if they get hired for that, thinking that they might get a month or a month and a half of lifeguarding, and are they going to be disappointed? Or are they just going to be happy they have a job? And to hire people in this economy right now is a good thing too. So I'm a little bit tossed up because I really don't think we'll be opening the pool. But if there's that small chance, you try to take it. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just in following Councillor Simpson's, I thought, process, maybe Justin or Cam could help us out with the thought process with regards to just the staff alone, and whether we could, you know, let them put their lifeguarding license to the side and put them to work in another aspect of the community. I understand what Councillor Holm is also saying about our parks, and whether that might be an area where we might need some catching up, or a lot of heavy lifting, and maybe you can help us with some of that process if you're looking at hiring 7 staff, for example.
Yeah, I can clear that up a little bit. So last year when the pool failed, if you remember, we used the existing lifeguards, which are some of these lifeguards in our parks department, kind of as a backup to keep them busy for at least a few weeks, and that worked out well that year. But that year we weren't handcuffed by the pandemic and how many staff we can have in a certain location at a certain time. So this does create some difficulties. It will improve the service level in parks, and I know there has been some concern with that service level in park, and we are less staff than we usually are in across operations. So the weed whipping and things like that have fallen behind a bit. So what I recommended is, you know, these staff had experience in parks last year. They came and did some tree beds with some wood chips and everything, and it worked out well last year. We would have to come up with some new procedures and maybe have them work a different shift, but it's something that's definitely possible. It's not as simple as bringing on 7 new staff. We're kind of at our capacity at our shop now. We still are staggering our start times and our end times a little bit, not as much as we were, just so we don't have the big group of people coming. But these are things that can be figured out. It's just they will need to be. So, and we still have to take the COVID precautions, the 2-meter distancing, and how many staff can be in a vehicle into consideration when deciding something like this. So I hope that answered the question.
Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Worship. I think we've gone off on 2 different tracks here. We're talking summer students and we're talking pool. Summer students, lifeguards, rec staff could be 2 different skill sets completely that we should be giving our administration the opportunity to, you know, if they need recreation staff, they need recreation staff. We're trying to combine this and say, okay, we'll hire pool staff that are going to be recreation staff. And I think the town looks quite fine, being what the town staff are doing right now. I actually commented to Kaylin about a week ago how impressed I was, because I walk the town every night, and our alleys are being graded, the sewers are being looked after, and I sent Kaylin a text as I was out complimenting them on how hard our staff are working right now. So I don't see that everything is being neglected and left behind. I can see we don't need 1.5 inches grass in a soccer field if kids ain't playing. It can be 3 inches, mowed every 10 days instead of every 7. So, you know, I just looked at it differently, being the situation we're in. And, you know, again, I go through the town and a different street every night, and I think it's looking quite fine for, you know, the amount of staff that they're working with.
Okay. That's a good point that you make about the different structure of staffing, that's for sure. I'll open the bidding, and who wants to select an option and, or make a motion? Counselor Holm?
I would like to move that we direct administration to open the pool when authorized by Alberta Medical Health, and that we hire the necessary lifeguards if they are open to taking the training and requirements to work as in parks until such time as Alberta Health provides us the okay to open the pool.
Okay, so that's recommendations 1 and 2. So we have a motion by Councillor Holm on the floor. Any discussion? Cameron?
With respect to how the recommendation was written, one of the challenges administratively we're looking for, if we do go ahead with opening the pool, is a sense of the timing. So for example, without a number or without a date, if we receive notification that the pool can be open on August 25th, for example, to give us one weekend, do we do that, right? So that's why the recommendation said July 20th. That would allow us for approximately a 5-week season. If council doesn't want to provide with a sort of a drop dead date for that type of recommendation, that's also fine. It will simply mean that we'll endeavor to open it whenever we can open it, with the knowledge that it'll be closed on August 31st.
Councillor Holm?
Be happy to amend my motion to add the caveat that council approves the opening once Alberta Health okays the opening of pools. That way it is revisited, that we hire the staff now if they're open to taking the training to work in parks. And if such time as July 1st, we get the okay to open the pools, that council then can make that decision right then to say yes or no. And if it's not till August 25th, then you're probably going to say no.
So then, just for clarity, you're saying that, as long as the pool can be open by a certain date, we'll go ahead, or? So that date would be kind of by July 20th, is that what you're kind of in? Yeah. Councillor Simpson?
What is the cost for the 7 employees for the summer months? So if, let's say you hired them tomorrow to the end of summer.
Just gonna pull up a number for us really quick.
Councillor Lloyd, while we're waiting, yes?
Thank you, Your Worship. This cost, you said, is already built into the budget. The cost of all these lifeguards, right?
Well, I think we have to remember that the cost of everything is also built in conditionally to the revenue stream as well, right? So I mean, if you incur these costs and have no revenue, then that's a different picture than just having, not, right? So it's.
To speak to that point, yes. So obviously the costs are projected against projected revenues, which are obviously not going to be reached this year. And then there's also the additional costs associated with other matters, personal protective equipment, changes to operation, which simply weren't part of the budget forecasting prior to the pandemic. So.
Okay.
We have about $65,000 is what me and Kyle quickly came up with. So it's about $80,000 for the whole year. That's not including the tot lot. So.
Okay, I don't see any more discussion or questions to Councillor Holmes' motion, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? So we have Councillor Holm, Lloyd, and Paul's in favor, and opposed. Councillors Chapman, Simpson, Avery, and myself opposed. So then, Councillor Avery?
I'd like to make a motion that council directs administration to close the pool for 2020 season. So option 3, but I'd also like to have a report brought back if they're needing staff for facility operations or anything for summer students.
So you're doing option number 3 and not directing that the money necessarily be directed to reserve, but to come back with have staff come back with a recommendation on whether to use that for summer staff. Any discussion? Okay, I don't see any. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, there's Councillor Chapman, Simpson, Avery, and myself in favor and opposed. Councillor Lloyd, Holm, and Paul's opposed. That's carried. Okay, and then we have item 4.2. Chief McEwen is here to update us on the Code Red report. Okay, welcome, Chief, and the floor is yours.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the Code Red events. So this came from business arising from the minutes, April 14th, motion from Councillor Simpson to have a look at the Code Red events in the town of Coaldale and their impact, what type of calls that we are going to with those Code Reds. So we'll just kind of go through the definition of what exactly is a Code Red for us and how we track that. So we did kind of amend the criteria for tracking Code Red events. In the past, we would just classify every EMS call where an ambulance wasn't coming from Coaldale as a Code Red event. That doesn't work anymore because AHS just sends the closest ambulance. So if we go on a medical call west of Coaldale, there's a high probability that we're going to get an ambulance from Lethbridge. So that doesn't really mean it's a Code Red event. It just means that ambulance was closer and it's coming to us. So we typically will not track Code Red events in the county for that reason. So we only track it in the town of Coaldale. Now, having said that, if there was a significant delay that may result in patient care, then we would track that and notify Alberta Health Services if that happened in Lethbridge County. Okay, so for us, 3 things have to be met for Code Red criteria. The medical calls in the town of Coaldale. There's no ambulances available in Coaldale, and ambulances coming from out of district. And a little bit of history about the Medical First Responder Program. So the Alberta MFR Program formalized the types of medical first response that are provided in communities across the province. So back in 2013, they started with some engagement. There was a couple pilot sites that they trialed out initially in 14, and then 2015 was open enrollment. So we enrolled July 20th of 2015. We had a letter signed by the mayor showing town support for Coaldale District Emergency Services to join the MFR response program. We had already been doing this in 2010 when the town of Coaldale divested from EMS service. We kept doing Delta calls and Echo calls, and we were responding with EMS anyway. So this is just more of a formal process and formal agreement with Alberta Health Services. And participation in this MFR program is voluntary. And of course, we wanted to continue doing that because we feel that's the best service for our residents in the town of Coaldale. So I'll talk a bit about our service level. So what we do right now, we can provide on-scene patient care up to the level of primary care paramedic. So what that means is we can get on scene, we can do IVs, we can use airway adjuncts, we can use several medications such as ASA and nitroglycerin for chest pain, heart attack type calls. We can use epinephrine for anaphylaxis, and we can use Ventolin and Atrovent for bronchospasms or people short of breath. So we respond, co-respond with EMS to all Delta and Echo level calls. We will go anytime EMS asks for us. So if that's a lift assist or to gain entry into a house because they can't get in, or if there's hazmat issue on scene, we'll go anytime they ask for us. All calls involving a rescue or fire, such as drownings, explosions, burns, anything like that, we're gonna automatically go with them on that call. And we added a time-dependent protocol to this criteria. So if there's no ambulance within 10 minutes of Coaldale, we will go on all levels of calls, regardless of severity. And one other thing we do to help them out is provide licensed drivers. So quite often we'll get on scene with them and due to the severity or the patient's condition, they need an extra driver. So we'll have someone who's qualified and certified to do that. They'll drive the ambulance. We'll also go in the back of the ambulance with them if they need additional hands in the back of the ambulance, and we'll go to the hospital with them as well too. So in our MFR response plan, which I review annually, there's 1,812 card types that we could respond to. So 888 of those cards are automatically will go co-response, and 924 is that time dependent. So that 10 minutes or greater, we're going to be going. So just a quick review of 2019. So fire medical events. This is total calls, fire 179, medical 241, for a total of 420. 200 of those medical calls were in the town of Coaldale, and 41 medicals were in Lethbridge County. So you hear me talk about Alpha, Delta, Echo. So if you're not sure what that is, this is the scale of severity, right? So Alpha is least, right, severe. Echo is immediately life-threatening. Okay, so Echo would be your cardiac arrest, right? Severe anaphylaxis, someone's not breathing, that's an Echo call, okay? So the top two there, Delta and Echo, those are the ones that we automatically co-respond with EMS. And that time-dependent criteria, if it's over 10 minutes, we will go to anything. Even if it's an alpha call for a fall, you know, it may be not severe at all, but it could be, you know, an older patient that slipped on the sidewalk and now they're sitting in -30 waiting 10 minutes for an ambulance to come. So I don't like to sit back when we're at the fire hall when we could be out there comforting and, you know, warming that patient and doing something. So that's why we'll go to everything. So this is total medical calls that we did in 2019 by that call determinant. So you can see majority of the calls we do are Delta, far more than all the other call types. 174 Delta calls, and we did 10 Echo calls. And that's just the code red chart showing the trend line that these are increasing year over year, especially kind of since 2017. It hit that 15 and 24 in 2019. So it's trending up, and we're definitely doing a little bit more of those. So then I looked at, well, what types of calls are we doing for those code reds? So determinant-wise, 11 were Delta, 2 were Echo. So 57% of our code red events are for the most life-threatening calls that you can have according to the scale. So those calls by type, you know, we do MVC, so that would be an MVC in Coaldale, so car accident in Coaldale, and we're waiting for an ambulance to come from Lethbridge. Trauma or pain was the most. There was 8 calls for that. Unconscious, breathing difficulty, chest pain, seizure, stroke, and other. Other was kind of like general weakness, would have been an alpha call. So then we kind of looked at response times and wait times. So on the left, the out-of-district ambulances. 21 times it was Lethbridge Fire that was coming out with an ambulance. Once it was Raymond, and once it was Tabor. So 9 out of 10 times, pretty much Lethbridge is going to be coming unless they're in code red themselves. So an ambulance from elsewhere would come to Coaldale. So we looked at our times, CDES, so that's us. Our average response time for these code red calls was 5 minutes. And I didn't get to look at all 23 code red calls because I was missing some information from AHS that I didn't quite get back in time. So the numbers that we're looking at on this slide is based on 17 of the code red events that I did have all the information for. Okay. So 5 minutes for us to get on scene. The out-of-district average response time was 16.5 minutes. And the average wait for EMS was 8 minutes. So average for us, we get on scene first, initiate patient care, typically wait 8 minutes for that ambulance to get there. The longest wait time we had was 17 minutes during this time frame when we had to wait for an ambulance to come from Raymond. 7 of those 17 incidents, there was a wait time of 10 minutes or greater. So patient outcomes for things such as stroke, heart attacks, it's difficult to assign an outcome to a patient's health because we don't track how that patient does after EMS takes them. So we can't really quantify that, you know, these patients had a value of 25%, had better outcomes versus, you know, poorer outcomes. But what I can say for some of those calls is we know they're extremely time sensitive. Calls such as strokes and heart attacks are critically time sensitive. For every minute that goes by, that's heart muscle or that's brain that's, you know, not getting the oxygen and the blood flow that they need. So a lot of those calls are pretty time sensitive. They need to be transported as soon as possible to the hospital, and those patients will ultimately end up going to Calgary potentially. So that needs to happen. They need to get that advanced care as quick as possible. Some other outcomes of these code reds, it does tie us up for a little bit longer than usual, sitting on scene, tending to a patient until the ambulance comes. Once we initiate care, we cannot leave, right? So if another call came in, we couldn't just up and go. We can't abandon our patient on scene. So we have to stay until we can transfer care of that patient to an EMS unit. Okay, so it does tie us up a little bit more, increases the number of calls that we respond on. Ultimately, the residents are left waiting far too long in Coaldale for an ambulance. And it can also skew the public's perception in calling 911. You know, if this continues to escalate and people start waiting 20, 30 minutes for an ambulance all the time, they might just stop calling 911, right? Either drive themselves in or even worse, not go at all. So we don't want to see that happen. This is information from Alberta Health Services. So you can see there, similar to us, seeing a consistent increase in their call volume year over year. Quite a significant jump in the last reporting period. Although their shift schedules and core hours in AHS's core flex system have changed numerous times since the town of Coaldale divested from delivering EMS in 2010, staffing has not increased. There continues to be 4 paramedics on shift operating 2 ambulances. If staffing doesn't keep up with call volume, the crew utilization rate will increase, which leads to longer response times and more time that Coaldale is without an ambulance available in town. So I dug into AHS's response times a little bit more. So again, as per AHS, they classify their response time as the time elapsed from when a call is received at an EMS dispatch center, typically Lethbridge or Calgary, until the first EMS unit arrives on scene. So this data is from the last reported period of Q4 2019/20, and they had a median response time of 14 minutes. So that means 50% of their responses are below 14 minutes, 50% of their responses are higher than 14 minutes. They had a 90th percentile of 18 minutes, so that means 90% of their calls, they're getting there in under 18 minutes. So if we have a look at other AHS sites in the south, we want to see how Coaldale compares to that. So if you look at Brooks, they got a median time of 7 minutes, half of what Coaldale's is. Lethbridge, median time of 7 minutes. Cardston, 9 minutes. Medicine Hat, 9 minutes. Pincher Creek, 8 minutes. Right? We look at the 90th percentile of some of these as well too. Lethbridge, 90% of their calls, they're getting there in under 9 minutes. You know, Pincher Creek, under 12 minutes, and Coaldale's is 18. Another thing to look at too, if we remember the out of district time it took for an ambulance to get to Coaldale was 16 and a half minutes. So we're getting an ambulance quicker from out of town than sometimes we're getting them from in town. There's a couple of reasons why it could be. So it could be they are out of town. It could be they have timed out because of their core flex system. They have worked too many hours and now they have to get timed out. They have to go for mandatory rest, right? And also they respond from home. And there's no push for them to get to the hospital in a decent amount of time to make a proper response. So I've talked to AHS multiple times about that because it should not take someone who lives in Coaldale 18 minutes to go from their house to get to the hospital. So that's partly why those long response times. And you look 9 times out of 10, we're getting an ambulance from the city. They're there 24/7 at the hall, ready to respond, and their shoot time is 90 seconds, not 18 minutes. So this graph was pulled off AHS's site as well too. This is a very disturbing trend that we're seeing from AHS. That started in year 17, 18. So those trend lines are both increasing. The darker blue one, if you can tell, so that's that median time. If we look back at 2016, our median time was about 6-7 minutes, which was now comparable to the Brookses and, you know, Pincher Creeks. And now our median time is twice that. It's 14 minutes. So Coaldale has a problem. It's very evident that their times are poor compared to comparable sites in the south. So it kind of brings me to the end of this presentation. My statement on this is, doesn't Coaldale deserve better? Why does it take half the time to get an ambulance in Brooks and Pincher Creek and Medicine Hat and Lethbridge and Cardston than it does in the town of Coaldale? Doesn't seem to be any accountability from AHS, because we have voiced this concern multiple times. So I would like to see consistent response times with other locations in the south, a staffing model that meets current demand and with plans for the future as they get busier. Improve shoot times, 90 seconds versus 18 minutes to get to the hospital. And accountability, 0 accountability. So that is my report on Code Reds.
So it's just for clarity, when you say getting to the hospital, you mean getting to the Coaldale Health Center, right?
Getting to the health center because they're at home, so the crew has to drive, get up from sleeping, get dressed, drive to the healthcare center, get their ambulance, and then drive to the call. So that's where the major delay is from the Coaldale service compared to a Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, or where they actually have people in the halls. And yet that's not putting the paramedics down. They're great people, they do what they can, but it's the system that they're working in is failing.
You know, on my behalf, I want to thank you for the report. It's, I guess, when you were talking about the wait time, like when Coaldale EMS is sitting there, and sometimes you have 8 minutes to wait, and sometimes you have longer, and I can only imagine what that must be like being on scene with a Delta or Echo kind of a call, and the anxiety going through the attending Coaldale EMS people as well as the patients, watching time fly by when it's such a critical aspect of the call. So it must be a harrowing experience just to be a Coaldale EMS person and wait frustratingly long times to get some progress going on. But thank goodness you're able to lend comfort and aid during that time. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the report. Unfortunately, these numbers are alarming, but they're not surprising me by some of the other reports. I would like to know what AHS says. Like, what is their response to you when you say this shouldn't be happening?
Through to Councillor Simpson. The last time I brought up the delay on response, I was told that they tried to get to the healthcare center as quick as possible, as long as there's no undue delay. So whatever their definition of is no undue delay, then they're fine with an 18-minute response time.
And Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we do not have 24/7 real service because we don't have anybody on duty 24/7. I mean, they're on duty, but they're sleeping, right? So they're not really on call.
So through to Councillor Lloyd, they are on call, so they'd be at home with the radio, and they would just respond from home. So there's very little time that they actually have to put in their core hours at the hospital, and the rest of that time is that flex hours. So they can be at home, they could be at the gym, you know, they could be having lunch over here, and that's part of the problem why it takes so long to get them to the hospital to respond.
Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think just explain a little bit more about the timed out, you know, because that to me is a very serious issue when your crews, you could have nobody on call, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, because they've done transfers for the city all day, both crews, so they get back, and they're both crews for Coaldale are timed out. So we go a whole evening without an ambulance because our crew's timed out doing transfers out of the Chinook Regional Hospital. So I think that's another serious concern that we have for our residents. This is addressed to Kaylin. Do you think this is an opportunity for us to start working with the health minister and possibly the minister of red tape to look at getting our service back? I believe we can provide a better service than what the province is. I don't see a better time. If they're willing to give the town the same amount of money it's costing them to operate this service in town, I believe we can operate it a lot more efficiently. As long as they're willing to pay us for all those transfers, we could run 3 ambulances.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Avery, I think that's a really good point. A lot of the staffers that we deal with, they're not the creators of the system. And I think as an action item from this evening, if there was a resolution from council for us to authorize the mayor to reach out to the ministers, both of red tape and the Minister of Health, to set up some dialogue on how to go forward on this, because this is a system issue. As our chief mentioned, the actual frontline workers are quite good, but they don't get to determine how the system works, what the policies are. That's a provincial level matter, and I think the lobbying would need to come from this council to those elected officials. And I think to close the loop on this discussion, I do think that would be a good next step for there to be a resolution to authorize the mayor to send those letters so that we can start to facilitate a deeper advocacy process for some systemic change in this area.
Thank you, Kaylin. Just one other follow-up. Let's make sure we're referring to AHS EMS, because they've kind of made themselves this own little entity within AHS. So we all keep saying AHS, but it's AHS EMS that we're really looking at and trying to, it's not Alberta Health Service, it's the emergency medical services portion of it.
I support your thought, but I just want to go back in history to the time when Coaldale divested of the service, and I think it was primarily based on the fact that we had the service and we were the contractor and we bared all the liability in that. But as time was moving on back in 2010 era, we were getting less and less control of what we could do with our ambulance, and they were telling us that we had to do it this way and that way, and we'd have to flex and provide cover for other communities. And then I think the thing that really fell, hard on Coaldale was the fact that there was a lot of care that, Coaldale make sure that we could flex to other communities. But then we asked and said, well, okay, while we're doing that, who's gonna make sure that Coaldale's back is covered? And they didn't seem to really care about that part. So I guess my roundabout way of asking the question to the chief, if you are aware of any of the municipalities that still run the contract, and that if any of those kind of issues are been resolved, or are they still having the same frustration of how they run their service? Because the last thing I want to do is bring back a thing where Coaldale sort of perceptively is running a service but has no accountability or direction on how it operates, so.
Great. So there's several services that are still doing that contracted model through AHS, EMS. One as close as Pitcher Butte. Pitcher Butte always ran a basic life support ambulance. They did not give it up to the province. They are a contracted provider now of EMS. So some of those stipulations are there. So AHS EMS is still kind of that big boss, and you do have to play by their rules. But there may be some way to tread through that during negotiations to ensure that you're signing an agreement with AHS EMS that puts Coaldale first.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you so much for your comprehensive report. I think this is probably one of the best Code Red reports I've seen in all the years, and it seems like this conversation keeps coming up almost every year. And the disappointing part about it is that we've never been able to get any further, and as Councillor Avery has pointed out, the AHS comes down and has given us the song and dance in a way that they're doing a great job, and the fact was going back to the first days of when Alberta Health took over, is that the promise was, and I think that in a letter or some kind of correspondence there should be this comment that there was the promise that there would be no degradation in service. And so we had resolved, okay, if that was the case, then this is the best we can do. And in the meantime, now your billable hours are all free, because the first 18 minutes to half an hour are on our dime. And so consequently, you're responding to pretty much almost 100% of the calls that come in. And then you have to wait for the 10 minutes for an ambulance to show up. I think that's how you're kind of doing the work. So you're not waiting for the 10 minutes when the ambulance says, well, we won't be there for a bit, so then you show up. But you're there right from the call out. So I think going back to gaining control of this service again is going to be the work of red tape reduction, because it was sealed, signed, and delivered, and it was going to be very, very difficult for municipalities to regain control as much as some want to and have tried. That this has been a difficult road to go down again once we gave it up. I'm in support, by the way, of any letter or correspondence that we move forward on.
So Councillor Avery, would you care to make a motion? And probably, I think you'll have support for the Code Red reduction, Minister, to step on code, yeah.
Sure, so I'll make a motion that on behalf of the mayor that we send a letter to the Minister of Health and the Minister of red tape reduction on the possibilities of exploring us getting into an agreement with Alberta Health Services, EMS, to take over the ambulance service.
Okay. So we have a motion by Councillor Avery, and any discussion? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and through to Councillor Avery, would it be helpful to have this report included?
And I like the wording that Chief provided to ensure that Coaldale's interests are top of mind in anything we do going forward. Okay, so we have the motion by Councillor Avery, friendly amended to include a copy of the presentation. Is that right, Councillor Avery? Okay, any other discussion? Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Worship. You're okay with all of this, Kevin?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, All right, no other discussion I see, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Yeah, it's carried unanimously. Thank you again very much for your presentation, and please convey our gratitude to the members of Coaldale EMS for being there to serve our residents and the residents of Lethbridge County that they serve, and I appreciate the fact that you acknowledge that the people working for AHS EMS are trying in a difficult situation to give aid as best they can as well, so. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the motion, thanks for the discussion and the support.
To item 7.1, field user fees, and we have, I believe, Cindy Hoffman to present on that.
Afternoon. Following report is to ask council to consider if there is merit in adjusting the field rental fees for 2020 in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to COVID-19, many restrictions and requirements have been put in place in regards to the public use of town-owned facilities, including ball diamonds and soccer pitches. At this time, local sports organizations are struggling to keep their athletes active and engaged with their sport while ensuring the safety of their athletes and also taking into account potential income deficits of families. COVID-19 has had a significant impact on if, how, and when fields and associated facilities such as bathrooms, concession, and bleachers may be able to be used. The sports fields, while being utilized, are not being used to the full extent due to modifications required by the organizations to ensure the safety of their athletes. While baseball is able to start up with modifications, soccer is not able to start at this time. Both sports will encounter reduced seasons and an adjusted level of service at the quads just due to the issues as mentioned above with like the bathrooms, the concession and such. So in your report, you can see that the 2020 field user rental fee is $126 per team per season for youth leagues and $220 per team per season for adult leagues. In 2019, $7,150 was invoiced for user group field rental fees as per the following invoices, which you have in front of you there. So at this time, Coaldale Baseball has just started. They were out on the fields once last week, and they'll be starting again probably tomorrow. But it is definitely a modified season. So normally they do run from about middle of April to the third week in June. This year they are hoping to get into maybe the second or third week of August. And Coaldale and District Soccer Association and Thunder and Tempest and the Coaldale Adult Softball have not started their seasons due to the restrictions in Stage 1. We are waiting to hear the Phase 2 information that will be coming out shortly to see if they'll be able to start yet this summer or not. So to ensure that for the individuals, families, and organizations that make up the field users in the community, financial implications to ensure that financial implications are not a factor in deciding whether or not to participate in field sports this year, it is proposed that either a reduced municipal fee of $50 per team for this season or no municipal fee be implemented. So we are just asking that council consider potentially three options. That council consider reducing the 2020 field user field rental fees for all organizations to $50 per team per season, so that's just a little bit under half, to account for the lower service levels provided, modifications to the way that practices are conducted by all teams as required by Stage 1 requirements, and reduced season lengths due to COVID-19. Or that council consider eliminating the field rental fees for all organizations for this season, or that council directs staff to maintain the rental fees, field rental fees at the normal rate for this season. So Spencer and I are available to answer any questions if you do have as pertaining to this.
Hey, Councillor Simpson?
Worship, and thank you, Cindy. I'm in favor of eliminating the municipal field fees, and I want to say I'm impressed with the Coaldale baseball right now with no fees and welcoming everybody. And I think we can take this money from the savings from the pool and put it into this. And I think it's something for the community can enjoy, hopefully, this summer.
Would the same provisions apply if number 2, like the lower service levels and whatnot, on like recommendation number 1, you had with those lower
Right.
service?
It's currently, and I don't mean the lower service levels, that's maybe a little bit deceiving. It's very difficult for us right now with the requirements for the washrooms, especially out there, to be able to maintain the, I guess, the disinfecting and the sanitizing of the washrooms is just a very, very difficult thing to manage right at the moment. So those would be one item that would not be open. So that's sort of, that is normally, well, it's always included with anybody who rents the fields. And that's one thing that we're just going to have to wait and see what comes in the next stage and what AHS and the province will be giving us for requirements and recommendations.
Councillor Simpson? Oh. Councillor Chapman, you were...
Thank you, Worship, and just speaking in favor of number 2. Just a further question about the fact that the people wouldn't be able to have access to washrooms or whatever out there. I'm just concerned that the public respect the public part of it, and that their private matters be adjusted accordingly and respect other public while they're there. I don't know if you'll be able to put up signs or do something even with any of the 3 positions. I think we need to have a really clear outline of disciplines, I guess, and expectations for accountability.
I guess that's one thing that I didn't really include in this. It was kind of, we talked about it after this had been put to paper. But in speaking with Spencer and with Justin, we've been looking at examples of signage that other municipalities and that are using for that exact purpose. And some of the signs are, they do list the I guess, the expectations and the accountability portion. So we're definitely going to be looking at getting something like that set up and out there. So,
Okay, Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship, through the city. Do washrooms have to be closed? Alberta parks are now open, and their washrooms are open. They just have signage on their washrooms that state that use at your own risk, that these will only be cleaned on normal cleaning kind of days, and please provide or come with your own toilet paper and your own hand sanitizer. So is it a requirement that they stay closed if Alberta Parks, the Alberta government's opening theirs?
yeah. Thank you, Councillor Holm. And that's sort of a sign that I'm alluding to that we had just discussed just in the last few days. We had seen that exact one, and we've just been watching, seeing what other municipalities and parks and such are doing. And that's the sort of the thing that we're looking at to post, and then we would open, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll go ahead and make the motion that council eliminate the municipal field rentals for all organizations and for the season. And maybe with that too, is we inform all user groups of make sure that they know exactly about the bathrooms and everything so that they can inform their participants.
Okay, any discussion to Councillor Simpson's motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and opposed? Councillor Pauls is opposed. Okay. That's motion's carried. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
And then we have item 7.2, land acquisition update, presentation by Cameron.
During our budget deliberations in the fall, administration and council discussed the potential of acquiring 1922 20th Avenue, known as fundamentally the former location of 7-Eleven at the intersection of Main Street, Highway 845, and Highway 3. We wanted to provide a bit of a report for council with respect to how that has gone, as well as what we had discussed in terms of next steps for that particular property. So when we discussed the opportunity of purchasing the land, we noted 3 strategic priorities associated with that purchase, namely the possibility of allowing for us to complete intersectional improvements along with Alberta Transportation. Second, to provide for an entrance feature to our newly redeveloped downtown, which is currently underway. And third, as a location for the placement of digital signage. At the time of those initial discussions, the property was listed for approximately $850,000, and we were going to endeavor to acquire the piece of property for a more reasonable price. And we are pleased to note that the purchase of the property has been completed for less than 50% of that list price, noting that there are costs remaining associated with demolition of the existing structure and so on and so forth. So we want to provide a quick report on those 3 strategic priorities, as well as a 4th, which is the temporary placement of one of our businesses, which will need to be temporarily housed during the Civic Square project construction. Myself and Spencer Croyle will provide that report. Spencer is going to speak to the intersectional improvements as well as the entrance feature, and I'll pass it along to Spencer for that.
Cam, and good evening to Mayor and Council. As Cam mentioned, I'll be discussing the intersectional improvements and the possibility of an entrance feature for the entrance to the Main Street area, which is likely a timely discussion given the kickoff of the construction as of today at that location. So first and foremost, the intersectional improvements that are possible at that intersection have been discussed and studied numerous times over the years. Ultimately, what that looks like now is that the town and Alberta Transportation have been discussing the possibility of making improvements at that location for quite some time, and we've come back to the province, let them know that we have now acquired that property, and we're going to be looking at that again with them in terms of technical enhancements that can be made for traffic flow, keeping in mind, of course, the need to maintain or also enhance pedestrian flow in the area too. So once we have a more thorough understanding of what that may look like in the short term, we'll bring an update back to council in terms of what Alberta Transportation may wish to consider there in partnership with the town. Of course, recognizing that one of the big hang-ups with making some improvements at that location have historically been associated with not having enough land to do so. So now a part of that equation is solved with the acquisition of the property. Just again, as a next step, we'll bring more detail back to council once we have that from the province. Item number 2, as I'd mentioned, there are some ideas that could be a location for, or a part of that lot could be used as a location for an entrance feature to the Main Street area, which again is likely quite timely because we're spending a lot of time and effort and focusing on making sure that Main Street is as good as it can be now and into the future with the Main Street revitalization project kicking off today. So really not much else to say on that side of things. It's fairly self-evident. We have the Gateways and Corridors strategic plan that council approved in 2017 that gives guidance to the same effect. That is a key gateway into that special part of the community. And additionally, we have the Main Street project. So ultimately what we're doing now is having a few conceptual designs developed just in terms of massing and orientation of what a possible entrance feature could look like. And again, when we have more detail on that, we'll bring conceptual designs forward to council likely sometime in July. And that wraps up my portion of the discussion, so I'll hand it back to Cam for the last bit of the report.
So at the time when we were considering the acquisition of this property, we discussed the opportunity potentially for some digital signage to be placed on the property as part of the overall financial model for the acquisition. So we noted at that time that this type of endeavor would probably be best suited to a public-private partnership type of model, whereby a private operator could potentially operate that type of signage, be responsible for preparing copy, maintaining the sign, doing the sales work associated with generating placements on the sign and so on and so forth. What we're preparing to do at this point is to put together a request for expression of interest for private operators to put together proposals for us with respect to what that might look like. That will consider everything from initial capital investment, size and type of signage, as well as providing for the town with opportunity to access a certain portion of that copy, either to distribute to other businesses, smaller businesses in town at a reduced rate, or to access for the town's messaging, both from a sort of a general messaging perspective as well as in emergency type events if notification needs to be provided generally to the town, providing sort of another means with which we can communicate. So we're going to be putting together that type of request for expression of interest, and then once we receive those bids from potential private sector partners, we'll be able to come back and present to council with respect to what type of opportunity we're looking at for this space. With respect to the fourth strategic priority, just a quick update there. So we have identified that this is an ideal property with respect to a temporary office placement. The business that needs to be relocated has a high desire to maintain a presence on Main Street during construction in a relatively high visibility location. So obviously this lot does provide for that opportunity. So we're going to look at a number of different models of how we can accommodate that. Obviously we're going to look to that with an eye of sort of accommodating the needs of the business while also doing it in a cost-effective way on our end as part of that larger Civic Square project.
Any questions through the either Cam or Spencer on the report? Councilor Chapman?
More of an operational question. I like the report and the direction that you're taking with it. My only question to you is the building that you're speaking of ready for that kind of use? I believe that there was some issues last year with frozen pipes and what have you, if you could maybe share that with us.
Yes, thank you. So we're going to look at a number of options. So if there's the potential to renovate the existing space in a cost-effective way and it will meet the needs of the business, then that's possible. Alternatively, that building is going to need to be demolished regardless. So we could be demolishing and then moving a temporary structure onto the space. So we're going to take a look at all of our possibilities there and make the best financial decision.
Councilor Avery?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have to echo what Councilor Chapman was saying. I'm really not in favor of renting that. The purpose of buying it was to clean up and get the appearance of our Main Street looking good, and widening, fixing that intersection, and to put any more money into, even a penny into that building, I don't think it was ever discussed or ever worth it. There is other open space that the town owns on Main Street that I feel that, on a temporary basis, that we should be able to accommodate the business that wants to move in. So I just don't see the need to put any money into that existing structure, especially when we know in 12 months it's going to be tore down, or 18 months.
Kalen?
I can confirm. I didn't have a chance to update Cam before the meeting, but the plan is to do a complete demolition of that building. The option of renovating that for temporary accommodations to accommodate tenants that are going to be temporarily displaced as a result of Civic Square, that's no longer an option. So I can confirm that it will be torn down and cleaned up. The extent to which it's used to place a temporary office, that is another discussion, and it is only temporary.
Councilor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Kalen, for that clarity on that. I support that as well, and it'll help us move it forward. My question would be more to Spencer. We had a discussion, I think, about a year ago with Alberta Transportation, and Darren Davidson had spoken about acquiring a sliver of that property for widening out an intersection. Did that occur?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, thank you for the question. To my understanding, there may be indication of that on the title of the property in terms of that shift of a small amount of the property to the provincial highway right-of-way. However, it's not necessarily relevant anymore because they have certain financial constraints that they deal with at the provincial level that may have necessitated only taking a small portion of land in partnership with the 7-Eleven owners at that time. So now that the town owns the property, the discussion can be quite different based on how we can partner with them in terms of the costs and benefits of maybe needing a larger piece of that property from this point forward.
Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. As for the digital signage, I've talked to an executive member of the chamber, and they are interested in advertising, not so much the building and the renting of it, but so that is something just to keep in mind.
Councilor Chapman?
Make the motion that we receive this report for information.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that report is received for information. Thank you, Cam and Spencer. And then 7.3, we have Terry May coming. Okay, the floor is yours, Terry.
Mayor and the council, we have a staff report here just for information on the changing of lead testing guidelines for our utilities department, since we are a water operator. So I'm just gonna, the couple of points that change here, just basically give you the key points that are gonna change, but the maximum allowable a concentration of lead in water was lowered by the federal government. Alberta Environment and Parks then obviously brought that down through to the municipalities. So what that means for us right now, the town has always tested its distribution system. We've never had any issues, tested biannually. So the big change here is we're actually going to go into, we have a set number that we're supposed to test inside the homes, take samples from the homes, and then obviously respond back to the homeowner within 14 days of what the results are. As far as the town currently and historically, we have not had any issue with our distribution system. We do not believe there are any service lines that are there, but there may, we may encounter one or two. The other factor to this is if it comes back that we do have a high reading, it could also be internally within the home, old fittings and different piping. So we are intending, we have until the end of 2021 to complete the number that we need to do, but we are intending to do that this summer and get it all done. So I just wanted to bring that forward, let you know that that's going to happen. It's been in the news a couple of times. So and as I said, any questions?
Floor for questions of council. Okay, Councilor Chapman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate your report and thank you so much. This accountability situation is really, can be nervous for some people as they may have to do some upgrading, updating, and you'll be advising and directing those who may test on a higher level, I suppose. My question to you really is about some of our commercial buildings in Coaldale and whether they would be a part of this or not, and whether the buildings on Main Street in particular, while we're doing this revitalization stage, that maybe that might be a good place for those businesses and those buildings to catch up.
Go ahead.
Their guidelines from Alberta Environment does not include commercial buildings. It's residential homes where the drinking water could be impacted. So that's where this directly applies, is for anywhere where there's potential for lead poisoning or any lead effects. So it doesn't actually include the commercial, not that we could not add a few in if we wanted to test that, but yeah, currently under this legislation it's not, or this direction it's not there.
So would this program be onerous, and would it be costly for us to initiate, or?
We have to test 40 homes based on our population. The testing is not so bad. It's not overly expensive, so we're looking at $4,000 to $5,000 in testing and some man hours and labor. We're planning on doing it within a 2-week span. So at this point, it still fits within our budget, and it's something we'll get through. If we were a little larger and had a lot more to test, then we might be back for a different discussion. But at this point, we're going to keep that in the operating budget.
And would there be focus on any particular area of town, or does the mandate mean that we have to, have a diverse sampling of all of Coaldale, or does it make sense that the older parts of Coaldale would be more susceptible to the potential of lead pipe and that?
So the province has broken down into 5 categories, and really based on age and times when they've done it. So most of our sampling will be out of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then the percentage decreases as you get newer, of course. So that's where most of our sampling will be.
And then you'll report back after the...
We certainly can, yep, absolutely.
That'd be good, just close the loop to let us know where we stand that way.
Yep.
Thank you for the report. And any other questions? If not, then we can entertain a motion to receive this report for information. Councillor Holm? Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? That's carried unanimously, and thank you again, gentlemen. Then we're on item 7.4. That was a new addition by Councillor Simpson. I'll open the floor to you, Councillor Simpson.
Been approached by several people complaining about their garbage. It's quite full with everybody being at home. This is mostly the families, so 4 or more in their household. They were actually complaining about it. They said that they weren't happy with it being bi-weekly even before COVID. So this is something that they feel is something that needs to be looked at, what our cost would be for it being weekly, especially during this COVID time, and also maybe after, depending on what it is. I know as a family of 4, my garbage is overfull every 2 weeks, and I use my compost and I recycle as much as I can. So I do understand where they're coming from. So in other words, with that, I would just like to make a motion to direct administration to come back with a staff report about the cost of weekly garbage pickup during this COVID time, but also maybe afterwards.
Shouldn't be amenable to maybe being friendly, and that seems to be restrictive. In maybe staff might be able to come back with other options that could be entertained. If for example, what does it cost for a family to have 2 black bins or something like that, and those maybe allow staff a little bit of latitude to bring back an array of options instead of just going with the one option of strictly weekly pickup.
Yeah, I'd be happy to add that in there.
Okay, so your motion is to direct staff to come back with a report on the black bin program and to come back with options to council to consider at the next meeting. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? And okay, everybody's in favor. Thank you. And thank you very much, Councillor Simpson, for bringing that forward. And we have 8.1, Operation Stormwater Update, and Justin.
Good evening, Mayor Craig and all of council. I just want to take this opportunity during the storm season to update you about the stormwater systems within Coaldale. I'm going to just go over a quick summary of our operations plans during storms and a quick summary of the equipment and the infrastructure we have in the town of Coaldale. So we start off with our general storm plan. This is just an idea of where the water is going, where it's coming from. We do get a lot of overland water from outside of the town. Fortunately, we've finished the Malloy project at 2A that has helped us out quite a bit. So this is just a general overview of the way the stormwater flows through town. Next slide, please. So we do have a storm plan. We maintain an overland flood plan and we maintain a storm plan. So the plan has been designed to ensure a quick and effective response to deal with overland flooding. The flood plan has a specific sub-plan. Part of the Town of Coaldale Municipal Emergency Plan. The plan includes emergency and non-emergency contacts, flood preparation, deployment of equipment, routine patrols, and monitoring of storm ponds, and then the protection of critical infrastructure if that's required. This is just a quick overview of the Malloy and Birds of Prey and how that system works. We do have an SRMD pipeline that can feed the Malloy if there's not enough stormwater throughout the year. The Malloy catches the stormwater coming from the east side of the town, that's overland flooding. It then flows through the Birds of Prey Center and out to the SRMD pipeline. When it goes to the SRMD canal system, it does require permission from SRMD, and now they require testing. So usually when there is a delay in that, that is why. We're waiting for kind of a response from our labs and a response from SRMD. We have had quite a few questions about how the dry ponds work in town, so I just wanted to provide a few examples of the dry ponds because people start raising eyebrows when one of the school fields flood all of a sudden. So these ponds are designed to hold stormwater in the town when we're not able to release to SRID. Example of the last storm we had, we used the R.I. Baker storm pond for a few days while we waited for that permission to release. Then we're able to open those valves, pump it back out. And these systems are built to hold that water, and we do ask that residents stay away from the storm water because it's not treated water. It is water from the road, and it's not very clean. And this is that picture there was the Jenny Emery storm pond. This next one is the St. Joseph. I didn't have a picture of it actually being in use, but the St. Joe's does have a storm pond, a dry pond in it also. And the next one is one of the bigger ones, the dog park. The only one that I had a picture of was the R.I. Baker, and I didn't use it in this because I wanted to talk about these three because they're the bigger ones. So the dog park, the way it's connected, it allows us to store a lot of water very quickly until we're allowed to release it. So, and please stop me if there's any questions. Next, we have the control structures and the staff gauges. So there are dozens of control structures and the staff gauges throughout town. These gauges allow us to read very quickly, allow us to read the level of water in different spots throughout town. And the control structures allow us to control the flow in and out of all the infrastructure in town. So you'll see a lot of our staff. You can see them in the background. They're working in this one picture. They're just running around, controlling all the flows throughout town. So we have quite a bit of other pumps and other equipment. We have two of these large screw sucker pumps that can move water very quickly from area to area. They were purchased in the last 5 years. We have several small pumps, and we do keep 2 rented pumps from a local contractor here in town. We rent pumps during this heavy storm season, just in case we need that extra equipment. So we rent those on a standby rate, and we use them if we absolutely need to. So this is the big complaints that we get during a storm event is the alleys. I'm sure everyone hears about them. So we do have several alleys in town that have poor grading and don't have any storm in the alleys. So what we do is in these storm events, we do end up spending quite a bit of time pumping out of these alleys, and we take the complaints. And as we're doing this, Terry and I are taking these complaints, we're keeping track of the worst ones. And that's how we prioritize the next year when we're rebuilding our alley program. So that alley rebuilding program is starting within the next couple of weeks. We've taken the complaints kind of from the last few years and say which alleys need the most work and which alleys need to be graded correctly, so we can at least help limit some of this flooding in people's back alleys. So it can't eliminate it completely, unfortunately, but we're going to try to do our best to get the stormwater where it needs to go. So the water lagoons and stormwater infiltration. So this is kind of our big risk here. This is our wastewater system. In that last storm 2 weeks ago, about a week and a half ago, our cell 1 in the lagoon filled very quickly because of infiltration from stormwater into our sewer system. This is caused by older pipes that have either cracked or broken throughout the years in the groundwater, or some of the people tying some pumps into the stormwater system or into the sewer system also. So that's why we are doing the programs like the sewer relining program. Every time we reline one of those wastewater lines, it's not allowing that groundwater to infiltrate into our storm or into our wastewater system and then causing our lagoons to fill up very quickly, which adds more water that we have to treat. So we don't want to have to treat stormwater. We want to go through our stormwater system. So when we're doing these relining, every time we do that, it takes a certain percentage out of that, and that's why we are putting it as a priority on our operations and infrastructure. And as part of the IMP, it was listed as a priority to keep maintaining those sewer lines. The bypass that was installed in 2016 also allows us to bypass the cell 1, so it doesn't fill up past the point of it being in danger, so it can be stored in our storage cell and then taken back for treatment later in a day. So, and I just wanted to show kind of a before and after of what sewer relining looks like. So we take an old wastewater pipeline and put a new plastic sleeve in it. Essentially, it's a little more complicated than that, but we've done that the last 2 years. Last year we didn't have a chance to get the RFP out, so this year we're working on it currently right now. The RFP from last year, as you guys know, was the money was taken from that to go towards the transfer station, so, or the sewer lift station. My apologies. That's the end of my stormwater update.
Are there questions by council? Councillor Chapman?
Thank you so much, Your Worship, and thank you so much for this report. Just an observation I made on the day that we got the 3 inches of rain, that the south part of town on 845, just before Cottonwood, just at the very entrance there, it was actually even down on 845 and the jail road, they used to flood really bad, and this year there was hardly any water sitting out in the field. In fact, the field south of the Cottonwood Pond did not have as much water in it either. So it seems like the drainage is working really well.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Okay, no other questions? I'd entertain a motion to receive this timely and informative report for information. Councillor Lloyd makes that motion. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Then we have information items 11, 1, 2, and 3. Are there any questions or concerns about any of those information items? Councillor Lloyd? Okay, all 3 items? Okay. So we have a motion by Councillor Lloyd to receive all 3 items for information. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Yeah, that's carried unanimously. And then we have reached the end of our open session of council, so I would entertain a motion to go into closed session. Councillor Simpson moves. All in favor? And that's carried.